Hello.
I guess the range. It's like you. People think appointment. Yeah. Yeah. Ready? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Javed Anwar. I'm the chair of the Committee on Innovation, Data and Educational Analytics. It is 9:12 a.m. I would like to call the October 25th, 2023 Committee on Innovation, Data, Educational Analytics meeting to order. This meeting is being held via live broadcast. Before I like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us via video conference and also that you observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak. Mute your telephone not speaking and keep background noise to minimum. Members, I'll call your name. Please announce your presence. As Javed Anwar present, welcome Wilson. Welcome Wilson. He's on his
He's on the
way.
way.
He's not here. Richard Clemmer,
Present.
Fred Farias,
Present.
Stacy Hoff,
Present.
Ashley Thomas,
Present.
Daniel Wong,
Present.
Kate Schwartz. Please record in the minute that we have a vote. And agenda item number 2 is consideration of possible action to approve the minutes of July 26, 2023 committee meeting. Members, do I have a motion and a second, please?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
We got any discussion? Those in favor say aye, and those opposed say no.
Aye.
Motion passes. Agenda item number 3 is the public testimony on agenda item relating to Committee on Innovation, Data and Education Analytics. We do not have any register to testify, so we'll go to the next item. Agenda item number 4 is consideration of possible action to approve the consent calendar. The consent calendar includes the item that can be approved without comments and or discussion. This allows us to save time, and the other items that need more of our attention. The consent items are highlighted in gray on the agenda. Of course, any board member can request that an agenda item can be added or removed from the consent calendar. We are going to work on the consent in items 2 votes, 1 on the non-rule item and 1 on the rules item. Remember, for following the non-rules, there is a consent calendar for consideration. Agenda items 5C is consideration, possible action to approve the replacement of a member on the health-related institution formula advisory committee for 2026 and 2027 by name. Agenda item 5D, consideration of possible action to adopt recommendation relating to the facility audit report. Does anyone want to remove any item from the non-rule consideration? Are there items that anybody want to add to the consent calendar? Member, do I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
I need a second, please.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Say no. Motion passes. Agenda item Agenda 5F1, consideration of possible action to adopt amendments to the board rule 17.2 AS concerning name changes from tuition revenue bond to capital construction assistant project. Agenda item 5.2 is consideration of possible action to adopt amendments to rules 17.112 concerning data required for use in facilities audits. Consideration of agenda item 5F3 is consideration of possible action to amend board rules 22.16186 concerning the future occupation and reskilling workforce advancement to research demand forward loan program. Does anyone want to remove any item from the consent calendar? Member, do I have a motion for approval of the proposed rule items on the consent calendar? Do I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say no.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Bradmore,
Yes.
in the minutes show that Mr. Wilson Jr. is now present for the committee.
Okay.
For the minutes.
Thank you. So welcome Wilson is present now, just to let you know. The motion 5F3 passes. Agenda item 5A. Dr. Melissa Humphreys, Assistant Commissioner for Data Management and Research, will present this item. Will be available to answer any questions. This item is only for information. Melissa, please. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Melissa Humphreys, the Assistant Commissioner for Data Management and Research.
Bring your mic closer.
I'm Melissa Humphreys, Assistant Commissioner for Data Management and Research, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about our preliminary enrollment numbers for fall 2023. Next slide, please. First, some background about this data. The coordinating board has collected this information for several decades from institutions, and each fall we request preliminary head counts from all Texas institutions. This includes publics and private nonprofit institutions. We request this information shortly after the census date in the fall, which is traditionally the fall class. We get 100% response rate for the data collection, and I want to recognize the effort it takes from the institutions to get this done during a very busy time in the semester. I also want to quickly thank Torcha Button and David Mead on the DMR team for helping select this information for institutions and compile this. The final numbers for fall enrollment are being submitted and certified now, and we'll have updated trends to give you in January. And I want to emphasize that these are preliminary numbers, and historically these numbers have been slightly higher than the final certified numbers we see at the end of the semester. Usually this comes out to be about a 2%. It comes out to be 2% lower once we have all of the data. Next slide, please. Before we look closely at the data, I want to call out a few highlights from the trends we're seeing this year. First, we did see an overall statewide increase in enrollment compared to 2022 of 2.5%. All higher education sectors have surpassed pre-pandemic enrollment numbers except for community colleges. We also saw increases in all race ethnicity groups, with slightly less steep increases for white and Latino students. And finally, from 2022 to 2023, female student enrollment increased, which is especially notable because since the pandemic, female enrollments have decreased each year. Next slide, please. Great, so here we see the preliminary fall 2023 enrollment raw numbers by institution type in the bolded box. We're comparing it to the certified numbers from fall 2022. The rightmost column shows the percent difference between this year and last year. Statewide, as mentioned before, enrollments increased by 2.5%, which comes to about 37,800 students. As shown, all higher ed sectors experienced an increase in fall enrollments. And these trends are actually similar to early national data that's coming out now about fall enrollments. Next slide, please. The column added to the right here shows the percentage change in fall enrollment for 2019 to 2023 in an effort to see how numbers compare to pre-pandemic levels. All sectors except for public two-year colleges have surpassed their enrollments in 2019. Statewide, though, altogether, compared to 2019, we're still down about 28,000 students. Next slide, please. This table breaks out enrollment numbers within the two-year sector. So two-year schools are made up of community, Texas State Technical Colleges, and Lamar State Colleges. From 22 to 23, there were increases in enrollment across all types of two-year schools. However, enrollment growth at the Texas State Technical Colleges, and Lamar State Colleges outpaced enrollments at community colleges. And this has been true for the past few years as well. Next slide, please. Here where we add comparisons to fall 2019, you can really see the differences in growth across the type of two-year schools. Community colleges still have not met their pre-pandemic enrollment numbers, while TSCCs and state colleges have surpassed in 2019. Next slide, please. This graph shows how the enrollment counts for our public two-year and public universities compare over the last 23 years. The graph illustrates points of fluctuation in both sectors, as well as the share of enrollments held by each sector. The gray bars represent major points of economic change. So you'll see the recessions in the early 2000s, the recession from 2007 to 2009, and then the pandemic. This is worth noting because we can see how during these times, two-year institution enrollment often fluctuates more noticeably than four-year. Since the early 2000s, two-year enrollments have made up the majority of all enrollments in Texas, but over the pandemic, enrollments across these two sectors reached parity. This year, two-year enrollments hit 51% of all enrollments. It's definitely too soon to tell if this is a turning point in the trend, but it's interesting to note. And also, as I mentioned before, matches what we're seeing in national trends and all enrollments. Next slide, please. As part of building a Talent Strong Texas plan, we made a commitment to disaggregating our data by demographic groups. Here we're showing the enrollment numbers by race ethnicity for 2022 and 2023. Although enrollment across all racial ethnic groups increased, this increase was smaller among white and Latino students, whose growth was about 1%. It's worth noting, however, that this is the first year since the pandemic that there have been increases in enrollment among all racial ethnic groups. Next slide, please. This slide breaks out enrollment information by gender. From 2022 to 23, enrollments across both genders increased, with the increase for male enrollments being slightly steeper. Something to note, as I mentioned before, female enrollments have been decreasing every year since 2019, and this is the first year we're seeing an increase. The bar graph on the right shows the share that each gender makes up of the total enrollment for 2022 and 23. The percentages are fairly stable since last year, with the share of females decreasing about 0.6 percentage points, but they are still the majority of enrollments in higher education. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation on our preliminary enrollment numbers. We will have additional insight for you after our certified numbers submit at the end of the semester. And I'm happy to open the floor to any questions.
Did you say this is pretty much consistent with nationwide percentages?
Yes, many of these
On
trends,
average?
yeah, and we've only seen the preliminary information about national trends, but these seem to be in line with what we're seeing.
Any guess or any speculation, or maybe you have some data to show that why we have less enrollment in community college in terms of percentage than the PSDC and normal college? I mean, why?
Yeah.
This is what we see.
That's a good question. The commissioner might want to chime in too, but we've seen the difference over the past few years of the pandemic. It seems like PSDCs and Lamar have maybe been able to be a little more nimble during the pandemic.
Well, I would point to the sort of difference in missions also between like TSCC is really exclusively focused on high demand workforce programs, and so they're focused on short-term high demand workforce programs, and they did move very strategically to expand those programs over the last couple of years. community colleges have, they've got a much broader mission. So they have students in traditional transfer programs, they've got many more credit students. They've got, they've workforce programs as well, but they have a wider range of programs. So that some of the workforce programs even that they offer at community colleges not be programs that TSTC would offer because they're not sort of the high demand, high wage programs that TSTC has as sort of their niche. So I'm encouraged, but what I'm seeing with our community colleges, I just have come back from a couple of national meetings where, you know, overall we're consistent with national trends, but we are there. You do see a number of states where they've seen enrollments decline. And you know, as our economy continues to be strong, one of the explanations for why community college enrollments have been down has been because of the availability of entry-level jobs and more job opportunities. Folks can not enroll or not re-enroll in college. So despite that, we are seeing some encouraging increases even this fall in community college enrollments. There's a slice of that I'd point to that is dual credit enrollments as high school students. And one of the things I highlight there is that we already have moved into implementation on our FAST grant program to institutions so they can offer dual credit and costs to students who are eligible for free reduced lunch. So we have had I think 47 institutions, both colleges and universities, but the majority of community colleges have opted into that, and we have been seeing some growth in the dual credit courses, especially for students who are low income buying credit. So that's part of what is in that enrollment growth for community colleges.
Based on this kind of last 3 years experience, do you think the community college may have something to learn from TSTC in terms of
The workforce
structure?
Yeah, so I do think so do they have something to learn from TSTC? Overall, I would say absolutely yes. TSTC has been very good, strategic at analyzing the trends in workforce data and identifying the high wage workforce programs that they want to focus on that are in high demand in their regions. And they've expanded those programs quickly. We haven't had the same expansion of workforce programs in the community colleges. So that was one of the drivers in House Bill 8 to move to an outcomes-based system, so that like the TSTCs have had outcomes-based funding for multiple years. So as they've been increasing what they supply in the high demand programs, then the state has provided incentive funds for them. The community colleges have not had the benefit of that until now, the implementation of House Bill 8. So I think one of the things we'll want to watch very carefully over this next couple of years is, do we see the shift in community college enrollments where we see more workforce programs in particular? Hopefully we'll be able to see more growth in those programs, as well as sort of in more credentials being awarded overall to the community colleges. Just a reminder to the board that the board has the authority to set those incentives for the college. So as you're seeing changes in that data, like we'll be coming back to you in April and in July to talk about where you'd want to set those incentives for the community colleges for FY25. So that'll be, so you may want to think about like, how do you make sure the incentives are aligned and where should we set those so that you're going to see more of that growth in workforce programs you want to see.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I will say we have, once the final certified data is in, we'll be able to take a deeper look at the types of enrollments at community colleges, and we're happy to provide that detail to you once that's all in.
Yeah, so Commissioner, following up what you said, and Dr. Wong, is that, when you look at the differences between Texas State technical colleges and your point about how you learn from that overall educational system, you got to realize too that there's about 17,000 plus students in Texas State technical colleges in our state, which outcomes-based funding was way ahead of the curve. And so now look at now, community colleges are now outcome-based, thanks to the legislature and this board, to be able to improve outcomes and really gauge it. When you have 665,000 community college students plus, it's a little bit more to keep up with. So I think there could be some challenges there, but there are some learning ideas and curves that I think that you're correct, that community colleges can deal with. But, we've got 50 community colleges, but 8 technical colleges. And so, you've got that, to deal with as well. But I think those are really good points in terms of finally looking at what is working and how community colleges, our 50 community colleges in our state can actually, achieve, future goals. I had another point, Dr. Humphries. So, since I've been on the board for a while, it was always that the males were not, going into secondary higher education. And now the data is showing females. So, I get invited to white coat ceremonies and health related professions and graduations. And I'm seeing like almost 70 to 75% for females in the health professions. And I was wondering, in terms of that versus the numbers and the figures you have now kind of are different, right? They're completely opposite.
Yeah, that's a really good call out, and we'd be happy to break it up by sector and looking at the gender trends.
Yeah, because before it was about maybe even 5 or 6 years ago, as I recall, it was, more women going into higher education. And now the trends are opposite. So it could be also that maybe males have to go to work or choosing other careers because post-pandemic. I don't know, but I think it'd be interesting to compare maybe a graph of the data of maybe 5, 6 years ago and see, because I think the trends have come.
Just to clarify, more women are going into higher ed than males still by a significant margin. So I don't think that trend is reversed. It'd be great to see that how in all of these cases where we're breaking out by gender or by ethnicity and race, how those percentiles map to the population. Just as something to add, just so we have a sense of where is there a discrepancy that's not as representative of our population at large. I did have one question about the growth is at about 2.5%. You said traditionally when it settles, these numbers come down about 2%. So are you anticipating
Total, yeah, total.
Are you anticipating it being perhaps flat year over year?
I think it'll still be a slight increase. I will note too, we did look at, I didn't put on the slide, but I'm happy to add that to it and send. But we did look at overall population of Texas and the race ethnic breakup and compared to the overall demographics of Texas. In this enrollment data, African American white students are underrepresented and Asian and international students are overrepresented. We're not looking at it now, but there's a category for all other race ethnicities. And this is especially difficult to piece apart for the preliminary data because right now a lot of the data we got from the institution, race ethnicity is unknown. So I don't want to necessarily say this is where it all lands because I think a lot of many of those numbers will shift.
And
Final data.
I'm sure you have this data as well. Do you have some sense of what percentage of high school graduates are matriculating? And then also for this body of students, what percentage this represents?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, the commissioner just asked for this the other day from us, and we did see last year an increase in direct from high school matriculation at about 2%.
22%. Now it's still only about 47%.
Yeah.
So we have a long way to go. We're lagging the nation a little bit on those direct college enrollment rates, and that's an issue. But to your point, so we can pull together broken down by like type of program, by race and ethnicity, but also by sex, and you see some variation across like what kinds of fields women are going into and what the growth has been over time. And then direct college enrollment rates, we were losing ground for a few years. It does look like it started to maybe hopefully turn that around just a little bit, but we've got a ways to go.
And Stacey, you're right. I meant the percentage change
Right.
of that because there's still, but the percentage change was actually greater for males than it was for females.
I know. I think it just always
But it
requires
tells you
context.
both.
It's the same as the technical schools, like the law of small numbers. If you're being underrepresented for a while, then you're playing some catch up. And so you can't always
Right.
compare the growth numbers
That's right.
when one's already there, already higher.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's why it's important to always look at the share
That's
overall,
right.
overall as well.
Yeah. The percentage of market share. Right.
Right.
Any other question? If not, we move on to agenda item 5B. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Miss Emily Cormier, Assistant Commissioner for Funding, will present this item and will be available to answer any question. This item for information only.
Morning. Morning. Emily Cormier, Assistant Commissioner for Funding. And so I'll be providing a brief update on the activities of the Formula Funding Advisory Committees. Moving to the next slide. So just to lay the groundwork, formula funding is the predominant way in which the state funds our institutions of higher education. There's unique formulas for each different sector of higher education, and they all have different metrics and are used to have a way to equitably allocate state funding amongst the different institutions. So as part of the legislative appropriations process, the coordinating board is statutorily required to provide recommendations to legislature on funding levels and various other inputs every 2 years to legislature. And so as part of that process, we're also required to convene an expert group of committee members. So that's where the formula advisory committees come into play. So we have 2 different groups, the general academic institutions, which now include technical and state colleges. Just kind of a side note, due to the changes with House Bill 8, the community colleges no longer are part of the formal advisory committee process. They have a standing advisory committee. So the other 2-year sectors, the technical and state colleges, were consolidated with the general academic institutions. And then there's also the health-related institutions formal advisory committee. And so this group provides information on formula funding levels, mechanics, and other inputs to the board. And it's really used as a way for the institutions to signal to the coordinating board and hopefully therefore signal to the legislature on things to consider as they're going through the appropriations process. This could be things like calling out inflation pressures or even small technical issues in the formulas that need to be cleaned up. And then this kind of goes through the process and it actually sets the stage for how the coordinating board collects student and course level data from each of the institutions every year, and then how we provide that data to the legislature, both prior to the legislative session when they're crafting the appropriations bill, and then also during the legislative session when they're finalizing the appropriations bill. So moving to the next slide. So really the advisory committee process kicks off almost immediately after the last legislative session. So the commissioner of higher education must set charges for each of the groups, and that occurs in August. So even before the new biennial fiscal year begins, the groups convene and start looking at different charges relating to the formulas, and those can be anything that the commissioner determines or others that are required based on statute or rule, or sometimes the appropriations bill requires us to have the groups look at things. So in the spring, the formal advisory committee will bring forward recommendations to the commissioner, who will bring forward recommendations to the board for adoption, and then we're required to provide that by June 1st. And so then, as I noted before, moving through the summer and fall, we'll provide that data to the legislative budget board and the governor's office. And moving to the next slide. And this is just a quick layout of the different charges that are being considered during this fall. So on this one, this is for the general academic state and technical colleges. The first 3 are basically just the generic funding level charge. So to consider every formula and make recommendations on the funding required for each of those different formulas. And those are unique for each of the general academics, the state colleges, and then the state technical colleges. There's also kind of a catch-all charge for just generally look at all inputs and metrics in the formulas. And then finally, there is a co-charge. So this is kind of unique this year. There's a charge that was set to both the general academic institutions and the health related to look at the differences in funding for GAIs and health and HRIs, particularly for similar programs such as nursing and pharmacy. So moving to the next slide.
So I have a question on that.
Sure.
That particular line, so for example, sort of pharmacy and nursing. So if there's programs around the state that are general academic now is the time for them to kind of chime in with this advisory committee?
Yes, so the pharmacy and nursing is the kind of common ones that are talked about, but it's
Other
broad.
allied health profession
Yeah.
groups that also that are right now classified under GAI can also now talk to the advisory.
That's right.
Have input.
The chart is very broad, so the group can really look at any program that they'd like.
Thank you.
Moving to the next slide. So this is the health-related institution formula advisory charges. So again, the first two are kind of the standard funding levels and formula inputs. And then we have a charge relating to a kind of very technical issue in the instruction and operations formula for the health-related. There's a supplement for small classes that are outside the main campus that we've asked the group to look at. And then the mission-specific formulas is kind of a new thing that's proliferated amongst health-related in the past 12 sessions. So in the past decade or more, there was traditionally only two mission-specific formulas. So those at MD Anderson and UT Health Science Center Tyler. And those were to really recognize their unique mission as our cancer center hospital and our chest disease center hospital. And
So I have a question on that. With the new announcement of MD Anderson moving to Austin and the new academic medical center, is that going to be for this biennium? Would they have to work on that as well now? Do you know?
I don't know exactly when that will open up or when that is scheduled to occur. But there has been a recent increase in the number of research and other clinical-based mission-specific formulas across the health-related institutions. And so due to the kind of really quick increase in the number and size of them, the group has been charged with looking at the implementation of these and considering similarities across the different types of. And then lastly, we've got the same code charge we just talked about. So that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions.
Members, are there any questions? If not, we move on to agenda item 5C to 5D. Agenda item 5C to 5D are approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 5E is consideration of possible action to delegate authority to the Commissioner of Higher Education to approve and submit the data reports required by Texas Education Code Section 61.0662D. Ms. Emily Korn, Assistant Commissioner for Funding, will present this item and will be available for any questions.
So this item is a request for the board to delegate authority to the commissioner to submit a legislatively mandated report on research conducted at our institutions. So the coordinating board is required to submit a report to the legislature on the amount institutions spend on stem cell research and the source of funds by January 1st of each year. However, we do not collect the research expenditure data until December 1st of the prior fiscal year, meaning there's not enough time to bring it forward to our board for the legislatively mandated due date. So this item would delegate the authority to submit the report to the legislature using the data provided by institutions by the deadline to the Commissioner of Higher Education.
Any questions? If not, I have anybody may need a motion and a second, please.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor, say aye. All in favor, all against, say no.
Aye.
Motion passes. We move on to agenda item 5.1 to 5F3. Were approved on the consent calendar. We move to agenda item number 6 is adjournment. Do I have a motion in the second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No. Agenda item 6 passed. Conclude this hearing for my item on education, moving on innovation data